Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday. Welcome to Sangha Ocean Beach Online. I'm Brother Dave, and this is our guest teacher and good friend, Brian Foster.
Hey, everybody.
As always, let's start by giving ourselves the chance to actually arrive. So finishing up anything you have to do with your technology, making sure you have a drink nearby, whatever you need to be comfortable. Now is not a time to rush. No need to blow the red light to make it to the yoga class. And then very naturally, and as we start to settle our external environment, our awareness starts to come home. We start to check in with our bodies. Am I warm enough? Am I tired and so require more cushion behind me? Or the opposite? Am I a little tired and so I want to sit upright? Just letting ourselves settle, enjoying this part of the process. The practice has already begun. Nowhere to go, nothing to do. An hour of being together. It's already begun. And then, like a snow globe, when I give myself this time and space to settle, it just happens on its own. I don't have to force it so much. And then finally, I bring my awareness to 2 fingers below my navel, to my tandian, the center of my body in traditional Chinese medicine. And I just start to check in, start to listen to that rhythm there. Very naturally. Sometimes very subtle. If I was rushing to get to the call, maybe not so subtle. The expansion and contraction there in the lower abdomen, at the center of the body. No doing, no objective, just listening. The clarity, the calm that we may desire from our practice comes naturally. It comes out of the listening. And then finally, I might give my mind some words, the way you hand a toddler a toy. Breathing in, I have arrived. Breathing out, I am home. In, arrived. Out, home. Thank you, Sangha. And again, welcome. Welcome and happy Sunday. We're glad you're here. Glad you're here. So as this is the first Sunday of the month, in lieu of a talk, Brian and I are just gonna take some questions. And if you don't exactly have a question, but want to share something of your practice with us, just to get some feedback on it, that's a great way to bow in too. Do you have anything you wanted to say in terms of hello? I've been kind of jaw-jacking.
No, I just always really appreciate being here, and I kind of think like anything in life is more fun with a friend. You know, going to an amusement park or going to the grocery store, it's still more fun with a friend. And so I think that's why Dave drags me along sometimes and pops me in here with everybody on this side, just so he can have more fun.
I won't deny it.
Yeah, that's it. I want to just open the floor up to questions, and if you guys don't have anything to talk about, I always do. So,
all right. So, dear friends, if you'd like to ask a question or share something of your practice, so we can go back and forth about it a bit, please use the Zoom interface. If you're on a laptop, it should look like a hand that says "Raise Hand." And if you're on a mobile device, you might have to tap your name and pull up a screen that will eventually get you to the raise hand icon. And we will then invite you to unmute. The floor is open.
I think Mike raised his hand.
Oh, okay. I'm inviting you to unmute. Please say your name and where you're joining us from.
My name is Michael Becker. I'm currently at work in San Diego on my lunch break. Happy to be here. So for me, I have so much to say, but to keep it specific, my questions are about attachment. And there's a book I'm reading called Hold Me Tight, specifically with relationships. And I was curious with Buddhism and Eastern philosophy, there's so much about non-attachment. Sometimes reading some of these particular parts about being in a relationship and attachment needs, and like oxytocin and stuff like that, and how it's good to have those kind of relationships, or even in the bigger picture, like the community here. Is there some parts of attachment that are actually good and useful, or is just everything, the best thing to do is to bring yourself from it?
Great question, Mike.
Thank you.
And what I mean by that is it gives me pause. Like, there's not really a bad question. Well, wow, yeah, that question got me right here. I'm like, okay, how do I want to think about that? The first thing I guess I'll say is attachment is a funny word. For sure, non-attachment to view is the most important teaching in Buddhism. That's a quote from the Zen master Thich Nhat, from our teacher. Non-attachment to view is the most important teaching in Buddhism. I remember when I read that, it knocked me down. I was like, whoa. I was several years into my practice as a disciple of Thais, and I was a little bit mad. I was like, why didn't anybody tell me this before? Like, if this is the most important thing, I should be thinking about this every day. But then what I hear in your question is the necessity for a reconciliation between our practice of non-attachment to view and our ever-present practice of the truth of interbeing. Because non-attachment practice without interbeing can become judgmental, isolationist, separating. But non-attachment to view with interbeing is really then just a skillful means to help me to connect more deeply. When I lived in the monastery as a monk, I suffered greatly Because one of the ways that I practice interbeing is by doing this, is by spending time with lots of people. I'm a people person. I'm a Sangha builder. I'm a community guy. I'm a family guy in my own way without wife or children. And when I express this suffering to my mentors, the elder brothers and sisters that were teaching me, I got two different answers, basically. One was, that pain you're experiencing is attachment. You need to let that go. You're here to let that go, which I interpreted as you're not here to make friends. And I didn't like that answer. And then there were others that I think were more built like I am in terms of like how my personality, how my ego has developed. And they answered me by saying, yes, that hurts. It hurts that we're not exactly friends, and that living this way makes it difficult to maintain friendship. Constantly moving, constantly changing rooms, spending a lot of time in silence, maintaining a lot of distance, a lot of pragmatic distance between you and other people as part of monastic life for a lot of reasons. And I didn't like that answer either. That's part of why I'm practicing like this now as Dave again, because I want to traffic exactly as your question brings us to, Mike, in that sweet spot where there's just enough attachment that I feel connected, that I feel loved, that I experience all the benefits of it, of spiritual friendship. And that's one of the ways that I practice interbeing.
I think Dave and I like to put things into kind of two categories of everyday reality and ultimate reality. And I think Dave's talking to a lot of the ultimate reality answer. And I agree with all of it, but I feel like there's some everyday that you're talking about too. And I was wondering if you could talk a little, you mentioned relationship a couple of times. I'm married, like I'm wondering exactly what you mean when you're talking about relationship and attachment.
I guess, give me a moment. The feeling of wanting to be around that person and wanting to spend time with that person, and it's mutual. But there's a side of me that's like, oh, I feel, like attached to that, attached to wanting to spend time and be affectionate. And I don't know, is it just all healthy to have that kind of attachment, or is there, where do you find the balance between following this practice, being mindful, not being attached, overly attached, and being healthily attached? Is that a thing? And how do you decipher where you're at in it?
I think that's a really legitimate everyday question. That's really hard to answer, and it's going to be so different for everybody. I always like to check in with the idea that I am still an animal, and I'm an animal that comes from a herd and likes companionship. And so it's hard to also look at ultimate reality and realize that everything that you get attached to ultimately can cause you, or does cause you, more suffering. And so sometimes I think about the two sides of the coin, joy and suffering, and the balance of that being happiness. And I understand, like, the less attachment I have to my wife and my child means that if I'm lucky and I get to outlive them so they don't deal with the suffering of my loss, I get to deal with the suffering of their loss. And so that's going to be the most painful thing I've ever experienced. Nobody wants that, but it's part of being fucking human. And so they're going to die. But at the same time, that's the suffering part of that coin. Like, damn, do they bring me some joy? Like, that's my little boy. He's 9 years old. Like, watching him and Dave play last night, like, oh, it doesn't get any better than that. Like, I can't find anything else to be attached to that's more joyful. Holding my wife, knowing that when I come home, like someone made me dinner out of love, spending time with her, just sitting on the porch when the sun is there. I see a couple of couples here in the audience, like, you get it. Do I want to live without that joy? I don't know. Like, it's different for everybody. Dave's doing the other side right now. And so I don't even know if it's necessarily a choice that you get to make in life. Like, sometimes if you can be in the moment and just kind of enjoy life every day and slow down, and just let life unfold in front of you as it does, you don't have to make those decisions about what kind of coin you're going to carry through life. It's just going to happen to you. Dave, you got anything?
Yeah, I mean, I experienced that last night as well. I am single now and live alone, and yeah, like, I touched a level of joy spending last night here with Brian and his family. We're in Brian's studio right now. That's really difficult for me to touch by myself. I can do it. I can go into a really deep meditation and, sit with my deceased father and like touch that animal. I love the animal biological element, that animal connection that I need to feel happy and healthy. But it's very difficult. A lot easier to just walk in this man's front door. And so I guess the last thing I'll say is, in terms of something very on the ground, because I feel like my initial response was at 10,000 feet and Brian's response was at 5,000 feet. So let's go all the way down to sea level. One of the metrics that I use when I'm trying to navigate, in a very practical sense, the decisions that have to be made around attachment, whether it's romantic or platonic or professional, is based on the definition of love from a writer, kind of a Christian thinker named M. Scott Peck. Dr. M. Scott Peck wrote a book called The Road Less Traveled. And in it, he defines love, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, as like the active promotion of the spiritual growth of the other. That's what love is. And so when I'm assessing the health of my attachments, right? Because I have attachments and I desire some, no man is an island, no woman is an island. So when I look at those relationships, that's one of the lenses that I find very helpful in a practical sense. Like, am I successfully promoting the spiritual growth of the other? Is my relationship with the other successfully promoting my spiritual growth? I have found that lens to be clarifying. And then another practical thing that I lean very heavily on is, by definition, when I am attached, I have produced a blind spot. I like to think of the retina, where the optic nerve touches the back of the retina, the screen that's catching all this light. We can't see there. We're blind there. Where there's attachment, there's blindness. And our brain is just filling in those two blind spots with our imagination right now, all the time. But they're there. And so one of the ways that I try to mitigate the dangers, the hazards of the inevitable blind spot in personal attachment is by outsourcing judgment. It's very important to me when I'm, like, let's say I'm going into a business dealing, I take counsel. I explain to 2 or 3 of my closest, wisest friends what I'm considering doing before I do it, because they're going to see that blind spot that I can't see. So there you go. Thanks for your question, Mike.
Thank you.
I have a hand up here. I'm inviting you to unmute. Please say your name and where you're joining us from.
I'm David. This is my first time joining you guys. Thanks to Bernie. She invited me. And I'm from San Diego.
Hey, David.
Hi. So I'm going to ask a question to kind of follow up what you've been talking about. In that I've been on a very full of solitude spiritual path for the past year and a half. And recently, working on letting go of attachments and getting to the point where I wasn't really integrated very much at all into the world around. And I recently decided that I needed a little bit more exterior interaction. I felt like that's where I was being guided by the universe. And so I'm in a point of reintegration, meeting very awesome people that feel like they're super good for my soul, and there's been no negativity. And I'm just wondering, is there a guidepost? Because I sit in meditation and maybe just in general pondering and wonder, how do I approach what is, I don't want to be torn away from the path that I'm on. I don't want, regardless of how good it feels, to find myself in a place where I'm not, getting, all the impersonal involvement that I feel is happening. Is there any signpost? What I've decided is I'm just going to let universal direction lead me, right? But is there something that that's something that I've been really focused on? Am I distracting myself, or is there something distracting me? And how do I tell if it's an improper distraction or if it's, I don't know. It's probably a very vague question.
I don't hear it as vague, David. Thank you. Yeah, I do want to reflect it back before I even respond, because it had a lot of parts to it. So what I'm hearing, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that's the purpose of this reflection. What I'm hearing is that you have had success with a style of spiritual practice that involved some cloister, right? Some separation from others or from lots of inputs, and are concerned that dabbling in, shall we say, spiritual companionship, or increasing the pleasure that comes from spiritual companionship, will become an obstacle or a distraction, or in some way divert you from this path with which you've had some success. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. And, and getting back into personal relationships, which I had I feel like I don't want to get any, I relinquished attachments. I don't want to get any more attachments, and yeah.
Hey, David, the first thing I want to say is welcome to some new friends.
Yeah.
Please show up every Sunday before we get too deep talking about stuff. That's what this is right here. There's a couple people on this screen that I know really good. We're close friends, and welcome to the group. That's what this is for. We don't sit here and pretend to know everything. There's some people on the screen here that have been practicing longer than I,
and me too. Yeah.
And I have questions, and so just welcome to our family. I hope to see you here every Sunday. Most of the time I'm in one of these other screens here, but that's it. Just welcome, and then I'll let Dave go ahead with the question.
Yeah, Sangha can be translated as community of practice, but my favorite translation is Sangha is family. So yes, welcome, David. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
There's a book by a Zen nun named Sherry Huber about relationships. But if you've never trafficked in her work, the way she writes, like every book, you know how if you've listened to a lot of talks by Thich Nhat Hanh, you've probably heard somebody afterwards say like, did he just give another talk on following the breath? Because like, even though there's all these subtleties and all these nuances, he also is kind of saying the same thing every time. That's part of his teaching style. And similarly, this Zen nun, Sherry Huber, has written, I don't know, 50 little books, but she's basically saying the same thing every time. She's only teaching the one teaching. It's very Zen. It's world is mirror. Everything you're experiencing is mirror. And so when she writes a book about relationships, it's a book about how the relationship is a mirror to help you to practice with yourself. And it's helped me. It's helped me. And then I think of the quote that Thich Nhat Hanh likes to use when he's talking about romantic relationships, or perhaps better to say, personal relationships. It's from the writer of The Little Prince, the French thinker Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. And Thai would often quote him saying, love is not two people looking at each other. It's two people holding hands and looking in the same direction. And so for me, this is an important, like as I try similarly to transition as I have been the last 4 or 5 years out of a very cloistered life into a life with romantic relationships and more personal relationships. I try really hard to not fall into just staring into the relationship. And then because then I think it can become a distraction, right? It can, just like my practice can become a distraction and I can spiritually bypass. Similarly, anything can become a distraction if it takes me away from my primary work, which is loving and understanding myself. Because I'm experiencing the entire universe, the whole cosmos, through that lens, through Dave. And so if I forget that taking care of Dave is the most important thing, it's like seeing the world through a camera and forgetting to take off the lens cap or forgetting to pull focus, right? If I don't take care of the camera, everything on the other side of it is made meaningless or warped in a potentially dangerous way even. And so I think your caution is warranted. And yeah, so that I'm giving like that answer of like, yes, do that, just do it carefully.
Like the practical thinking as well, that if you're living in a really good running monastery that has a bell going off every 15 minutes to remind you to be present, that's the easiest place to practice. And as you move away from that, the practice becomes more difficult. And so it's personal for you, where you are at in your practice, and if you're ready to take on more of that. What's the saying? About going to your family, if you want a really hard practice.
If you think your practice is going well, go spend time with your blood family. Like go sit at your mother's kitchen table.
Yeah. And so, you got to decide where you're at and is your life set up for the amount of time that a relationship takes? If whatever your life has going on right now, does it have the capacity to hold that? And just be ready for the practice to be a little harder.
You said you're talking about the camera lens. I mean, how do you tell that camera is covered up with a lens sometimes? If your vision is being obscured by this external perception. I mean, I think that's like the heart of it for me. Is like, is my gaze now being moved away from where it is, and there's something that's kind of shadow that's kind of wisping up around it. It's like that's I'm looking for.
I understand the double-edged sword. Manjushri, the bodhisattva of understanding in classical Buddhism, is often depicted holding a sword. And I love it because what that teaching is saying is that delusion is something we cut through. And I like that imagery. I find it helpful. But that sword has two edges because it can hurt you. All right. And so the same blind spot that is produced by, say, I'll make the example now personal, David. Like I have a lot of blind spots when I'm in a romantic relationship. I still have a lot of healing to do from the very challenged example of what a marriage was that I grew up with. Like my parents had a very difficult and dysfunctional relationship. And so I'm bringing like some very funhouse mirror skewed ideas to what a healthy relationship is and how partners interact and so on and so forth. And so the double-edged sword, for me, is that when I move into those spheres, when I traffic in an intimate relationship, I am inevitably experiencing the suffering and the challenge of those blind spots. I'm automatically bringing them up. And that's negative, but on the positive side, the other edge of the sword is that I have then my best opportunity to uncover those blind spots and to do a different kind of work, sitting with and healing those, a kind of work that no amount of time in the cave in the Himalayas is going to bring up. I'm never going to be as triggered by myself as I am on the phone with my mom or in an argument with a romantic partner, in a disagreement over something I really care about. And so it's not necessary to do it in every form, I don't think. I don't think that was what the Buddha was teaching when he said that spiritual companionship was the whole of the path and not half of it, as Ananda, his attendant, suggested. I don't think he was saying, obviously, right? He was living as a celibate monastic. I don't think he was saying that we all have to have a romantic partner or that we all have to have a lot of friends. But I do think what he was saying is that we all have to have Sangha, that we all have to be healthily and deeply connected to some other human beings. And that's going to look different for a lot of people. But that's what I hear at the base of those teachings, So I think your caution is warranted, and I think your pursuit is worthy as well. I think that's a very strong way to move one's practice into interpersonal relations of all kinds. Painful, but fruitful. Thanks, David. All right, we have a couple of hands. Yeah, all right. I'm inviting you to unmute. We can't hear you, Stacy. Sorry. You are unmuted, but your microphone perhaps needs to be selected differently. On the bottom left, you'll see a little picture of a microphone and an upward facing arrow. If you tap that, I'm inviting you to unmute again. It'll tell you what mic you're using. It's okay, take your time. Yeah. So usually there's an audio setting somewhere that looks like a little microphone, like a little old school microphone from the 50s.
I was telling Dave I was just in an art class 2 days ago, and I asked the teacher a question, and right when she answered my question, all of my audio went off and I couldn't hear anything that she said. I thought I was on her side. And so I was like, oh, her microphone's not working. And I noticed all the students were talking except for me. And then when I got...
Oh, I think we got you.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, okay. Okay, good.
Yeah, and when I finally got it working, she was like, and I hope that helps you. And went on to the next thing. I have no idea what she said.
Exactly. Well, I definitely think that what's on my mind today is relevant to the things that I've heard so far, which is a blessing in and of itself. But I am really suffering right now. I have I'm involved in a business with my mother and my brother, and oh my God, we are so dysfunctional as a family, that there is, I am caught between warring factions, and I am known as the peacekeeper in the family, a lot of the times, because I don't know, sweet, calm. I don't fly off the handle or whatever, but I am in so much pain over the relationships that exist in this scenario, in this business. And I don't know what to do. I want to run. I want to just say, F everybody. And I'm, I'm out, but I don't know how to bring us together. I just am looking for ways or thoughts or ideas for helping us find each other on a spiritual level that takes us out of this muck. It's just years of lifetime of just hate and misunderstanding, like total lack of compassion and our ability to see anybody else's side. And I'm really suffering. I'm suffering this, this is my family, and it's painful, and it's unproductive. And I'm just looking for anything I can bring to this situation or in these relationships that will help us. It's just painful. I can't control anybody. I can't get anybody to be nice to each other. There's no love, there's no compassion, and it's a barren, way to exist, in this. I don't know. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to be. I don't know how to set my own boundaries. I identify with everybody's pain. They can't identify with each other's pain. I just what would you suggest for me or for this scenario? How do I bring love back into this scenario,
I want to start by saying thanks for being open and sharing with us, because I know that part alone is hard, and I just appreciate you bringing that. I'm interested in what Dave has to say, but I just want to tell you that it's not. I can very much relate. I have similar things. I've owned a couple businesses. Sometimes I've been with really close friends and family members. I have some family members in my family that I think suffer, and be real. If they could just be aware of what's going on, it would be so easy to fix. Yes. But I have to check back in, and I'm still working on this myself. I have to check in with it. It's not my job to fix those people, and it's just my job to show up, and in that scenario, be patient and just radiate love. That's all I can do. I can't make someone in my family like somebody else or get along. And, I know this is a little bit of an ultimate reality answer, and not every day, because if you're talking about business, there's also money involved. And, it'd be really easy for me to sit back and say, well, if you're not attached to the outcome, then it doesn't matter. Like you'll have a great business meeting every meeting if you can show up and not give a damn about what happens with the business. Like just really not care, but just be there to be a part of that day and experience it. Like I understand that answer, but that doesn't help with everyday reality. Mm-hmm. So setting that aside, we can't fix all the suffering in the world. And so it's easy for me to disassociate myself with suffering in families that's on another continent or another state or the city or down the block, even my neighbors. And it gets really hard when it's in my house. And so to practice love and compassion and understanding in my own house with something that close to my heart, you know, the more you open your heart to somebody, the more they have access to hurt it as well. And so I'm not saying close your heart off to them, but I'm saying it's not our job to fix the suffering in the other continent or the other state or down the street or next door. And it's also not my job to fix all the suffering in my house. But the best thing I can do for everybody around me is to show up with love and understanding. And again, I understand we're talking about business, so there's probably money involved, and that's a whole other topic, but you don't have to hold all of that. Like, it's hard to do, and I'm still practicing, but that's my, like, you don't have to hold all of that. Dave?
I'll take the everyday reality answer. That was the ultimate reality answer in my heart, what Brian just said, word for word. Radiate love. Radiate love. 80% of my practice energy goes this way, so that the 20% of my practice energy that goes externally is clear and strong. But 80% of my awareness is on me, on mindfulness of my body, of my feelings, of my thoughts, of my consciousness, right? The four establishments of mindfulness. I'm putting that energy to myself first, 80% of it. That's the ultimate reality answer. And then in everyday reality, what you're describing is a function of Sangha, right? Whether it's your family and or business partners and or any community that we're in, right? We're practicing Sangha with, if we are practitioners. And part of practicing Sangha is exactly that, is difficulty. Right? It's unavoidable. Maybe not always in the ways that you're experiencing or to the degrees that you're experiencing, but some difficulty, some friction is unavoidable. There are, in traditional Buddhism, there are what are called the 7 steps for resolving conflict. They're outlined in a book called Joyfully Together, which is our tradition, the Plum Village Tradition, Thich Han's tradition, book on how to operate as a Sangha. And a big part of that book is about how to deal with the difficulties that come up, which is why this list of conflict resolving practices is included and explained in some detail. I'm hearing the benefit of 2 of them right now for your situation immediately. One is called putting straw on the mud. And what that means is, like, sometimes some sufferings have been there for so long. They're so intractable. They're so baked into the relationship and the history and the dynamic that they are unresolvable. And so the only practical thing to do is to throw straw on that mud and walk away. So that's number 1, right? And then the second practice, so once you've determined to what extent that can be done, how much can I just say, that's not my problem, right? And then whatever's left, because there will be a remainder, especially because we're talking about, you know, financial things and family things, right? How do you walk away really ever from those concerns? You kind of can't. And so there'll be some remainder that still wants attention. And another of those practices is deep listening. And what I mean by that is gathering all the parties involved, remotely or in person, it doesn't matter, and explaining, like, okay, I feel like, you know, imagining yourself or another maybe neutral party facilitating, but introducing the intention, like, what we're here to do at Stacy's request is to discuss this, this, and this. And each person is given, let's say, 30 minutes. So you might have to, depending on the number of people involved, you might have to do this over multiple days, to just share anything that they want to share on those topics. And everyone else just listens in silence. And then the next person shares. There is no back and forth, no dialogue, no questions. Right? And then give that a
Wow.
period of some months is usually what I find the most beneficial. Like maybe then return to that 3 months later. And what you're doing there is you're opening a door, right? As wide as it can be open, right? You're giving everybody the opportunity to hear everybody else's suffering, everybody else's point of view, and then sit with it. And then each person is going to be able to practice with that and develop compassion and greater understanding and more enlightened perspective, etc., exactly to the capacity that they have. But you see how you've done that without shaming anybody or cornering anybody or blaming anyone? You've just put it all out on the table, and then you got to give it time. You got to give it time for those side conversations, you know, for Aunt May calling Uncle Joe and being like, hey, did you really mean that? You know, and like, and all that, and then let the organism, right, give it time to like heal itself to whatever capacity it has. And then you can go from there. So those two thoughts, those two practices came up for me, Stacy.
Wow. I'm envisioning that, and that's powerful. Like to not let anybody respond or just hold it, you know. Thank you. What did you say the name of the book was?
Joyfully Together. Joyfully Together.
So much.
Welcome.
Okay.
Do you have anything else, Brian?
I also want to know that book and those steps that you have, but I don't want to take up Sangha time because we're down to like 15 minutes and just a couple more questions. Is there a way for you to put that in the patronage page or something like that so people can get access to it later? Like I can go there later and just...
You know what I'll do? I'll speak to it in my next newsletter. I send out an email every Friday. If you're not already signed up for it, go to davekenneally.com and sign up for that email newsletter, and I'll put a little blurb about it and a link to it in my newsletter on Friday. Thank you. Easy,
Perfect.
Easy done.
Next question.
I'm inviting you to unmute. Thanks, Stacy.
Hey, hello everybody. I was I don't have questions for myself. I was listening to David talk about wanted to reintroduce himself in, and I had a question, and then what Stacy was listening with Stacy had another question. So I hope you don't mind maybe a two-part question. So I was curious when if David had considered the reason why he had gone to retreat for if I'm remembering correctly, like 1.5 years without a lot of external relationships. And now as entering back in, if the reason why you had retreated away from relationships, if those reasons are still even present in the way that you look at your life right now. And then the second part would be for Stacy, is this idea that as I listened to you talk about the dynamic in your family business, I was curious to know and wondering what everyone that's involved, what their answer to the question why they're involved, what that would be. Like, what's the reason why you're all in business together? Because it didn't sound like it's too clear as to why people are involved anymore. And that sometimes people, from what I could tell, are really concerned with being right, and owning their position and trying to maintain control. And maybe if you do follow that idea that David suggested of asking, like, we're here to talk about, Stacy's concerned about this, it might be healthy to throw that question into, like, why are you involved in this business? And then they can answer personally for themselves why they're involved. And that might also kind of peel back the onion and show you where that tension is, because people might be involved for very different reasons. And the fact that it's unknown to the other parts involved, that's causing the tension. Because everybody's fighting for their own little piece and no one is holding hands together looking in the same direction. Right? And that's it. I'd love to hear from both of you if that's, I'm not out of turn with this way of asking.
First, I want to say hi to Sean Prince in Alaska. It's good to have you here, buddy.
We were just there. We were just there.
And then I think Stacy's got plenty of things to think about now, so I'm not even going to talk about that. And then I can't talk too much about why Dave went on that retreat, so I'm interested to hear.
What are you retreating from, right? What are we retreating from when we're on retreat? That's the first thing. You guys know me. I like to be really clear about the definitions of words. If I'm going to traffic in words, which are so slippery and elusive and confusing and nuanced, I at least want to have shared definitions as best I can. So for me,
I literally have to always be tracking when I'm talking with Dave about what words I'm using. And when I'm unclear about a word, I'm not totally sure that's the definition, I'll tell him before. I'll say, I'm not totally set on this word, but, you know, then I'll say the word, or we'll have to like define words for each other. It's fun if you're into English, which I am, so it's kind of fun, but it's something to know about Dave. Like, he'll analyze every word you used. Go ahead. What are we retreating from?
Sorry, you're welcome. I can't help it.
I'll take a thank you. Yeah, I like it.
I'm a word nerd for sure. Proud word nerd. Everything that I care about, everything that I am, everything that I hold dear, I cannot retreat from. So even though I spent 6 years in monasteries, and I think what Sean was referring to is I spent a little over a year at one point, like abstaining from all electronic communication. So when I was training to be a monk, I sent out a message to everyone I knew and said, if you want to talk to me, you got to come here to upstate New York where I am, or you got to write me a letter. I'm not doing any phone or any email or anything electronic. I did that for a little over a year. So if we can't retreat from the things that we really care about, what are we retreating? What does that mean? And the answer I came up with was that what I was doing during that time, what I was being supported in doing by those settings, by those monasteries and practice centers, was I was retreating from the things that distract me from the things that I really care about. Because once I got into that setting of quietude and spaciousness and routine, everything came up. Everything came up. All the relationships, all the pain, all the history, all the love, all the enthusiasm, everything I really am needed, and this is true for all of us, needs a lot of space to be and to step forward into. And we're often, more often than not, too busy to allow it. And so we're not being our full selves. We're not being real human beings. We're being this little sliver of ourselves that like makes it through the very intense routine that we're in, with so much bombardment and so much data, so much time, so much thinking about time. And then in terms of the nuts and bolts of your question, Sean, like, are those causes and conditions that brought me to finding that practice skillful, are they still present? Yes. Like I've been through, for example, I've been in and out of 2 romantic relationships in the last 5 years. I've had 2 romantic partners in the last 5 years. And both times I saw myself doing a lot of the same things, same unskillful, painful, blind spot ridden things, unskillful, unbeneficial actions that I would have done 10 years ago. Not as many and not as intensely, but a lot of those themes are still there. I still have a lot of those fears and anxieties, for example. But the difference is that because I've spent so much time and put so much energy and given myself so much space and sought out so much support in Sangha and mentorship, etc., to look at myself there. Now, as I was doing those things in the last 2 relationships that I've had, I was able to really clearly see it. I couldn't yet really stop it all. But wow, I was just like in the audience, watching myself on the stage, being my half of that same relationship that I learned from my mom and dad and that I've been recreating ever since. And so that's a huge step towards finally unwinding some of those things and deepening in that capacity. But that's the process. It's not that it all went away. It's just that my ability to see it and understand it has heightened.
We're kind of running short on time. I have a lot to say about this. So we can't always go to retreat all the time. And so a real everyday reality practice that Dave and I have is what we call going to 10,000 feet. And so in our schedules, we have a day a week or a day a month where I have scheduled time in my planner to sit down and go all the way up and think from way up here about what's the most important thing to me. And so before you can do that, you have to take more time and be with yourself and figure out what's the most important thing to you. And for someone with a family like myself, it's relatively easy. I want the most time, very selfishly, I want the most time with my son because he's only going to be 9 years old for 1 year. And every Saturday and Sunday that I miss part of that, I can never get that back. So my number one thing in life is to get to spend as much actual time with my son when he's the age that he is that day. Not planning for his college career or not anything else. Like that's number one. Like how do I spend the most time with him right now today? And so if that's my number one thing, and every week I can check in with that, I go to 10,000 feet and I look at my business plan and this is where blind spots help and Sangha helps and friends help because I can check in with Dave because he has the same practice. And I'll say, hey, I'm thinking about expanding my business. I can make this much more money. You know, I got these opportunities coming forth. Like, this is a really good deal. And we both like plan it all out. And I'm like, that's going to work great. You know, like I do this little thing, I make this more money. Then we can go on these more vacations. And then I start that. And then I get back, I hit that weak part where I go to 10,000 feet and I look at that business plan from 10,000 feet and I go, oh, I actually have to work a little more to make all that happen, which means I don't see my wife and my child this week as much and next week and all of next year when I'm working real hard to get to retirement or whatever you're going for. I miss out on that. And so we're running out of time, but I want to say everyday practice, figure out how to go to 10,000 feet more often and look at your life from there. And I think it helps me and Dave make better decisions. That's one of my retreats.
I'm inviting everybody to unmute so we can all say goodbye together in our last minute here.
There's a couple of hands on the screen we didn't get to, and I'm like kind of bummed out that I didn't get to hear from everybody.
Every Sunday.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Smell you later.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sangha. Too hard to do alone. That's why we do this together.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Glad you made it, David. Bye. Love
Love you, Vavi.
Woo!
Love you guys. Thanks.